Audrey Reynolds stood at the windows of her Lake Shore Drive penthouse, watching Lake Michigan's waves crash against the shore. 6 months since Edward's funeral, yet the emptiness of the 6,000-square-foot residence still surprised her daily. 20 years of marriage had left her with an $8 million estate, priceless artifacts from global travels, and no one to share them with. Her fingers traced a Ming Dynasty vase Edward had acquired. An investment, he'd called it, never mentioning its beauty. The porcelain caught morning light, casting shadows across marble. Like everything in this mausoleum of a home, it was perfect, pristine, and cold. Memories surfaced. Their 15th anniversary party. Edward raising his champagne glass at the Drake Hotel, toasting his beautiful wife, while Chicago's financial elite admired their perfect union. Only Audrey recognized the performance, Edward's eyes never meeting hers during the toast. That night, he'd slept in the guest room, their 4th month without intimacy. The funeral mirrored this pattern, another performance. Edward Reynolds, investment genius and philanthropist, mourned by the city's elite. Audrey had stood composed in Chanel, accepting condolences from people who'd dined in her home yet never known her. Only Rebecca offered genuine comfort, her hand conveying understanding beyond platitudes. Rebecca's morning call penetrated Audrey's isolation. Her insistence about the club fundraiser met resistance, but her suggestion of a personal trainer stirred something in Audrey. Edward would have disapproved of such indulgence. He had always controlled their calendar, social engagements, charitable giving. But Edward was gone. The thought hung in the air, terrifying yet liberating. Afterward, Audrey wandered through rooms filled with acquisitions rather than memories. A Moroccan tapestry from a trip where Edward spent more time on calls than with her. A Barcelona sculpture from a gallery his firm later invested in. Her life had been curated, not lived. Perhaps Rebecca was right. Perhaps it was time to reclaim something for herself. Ryan Miller checked the address before approaching the high-rise. At 28, he'd built a respectable client base, but nothing had prepared him for Lake Shore Drive's opulence. The doorman eyed his gym bag suspiciously before directing him to the private elevator. As he ascended, Ryan rehearsed his approach. Rebecca had briefed him well. Wealthy widow, isolated, needing motivation beyond fitness. A client like Audrey Reynolds could fund his dream studio, maybe clear his mounting debt. The trick was making her feel special, needed, valued. Things rich women paid for beyond exercise instruction. The penthouse doors opened into a foyer larger than his apartment. Audrey Reynolds stood framed against windows, smaller than expected. Designer workout clothes hung loose on her frame, suggesting weight loss. Mid-50s but remarkably preserved, money's privilege. Yet her eyes revealed vulnerability at odds with her surroundings. Their introduction was formal. The initial assessment revealed decent natural fitness undermined by grief-induced neglect. She followed instructions precisely, almost eager for approval. Unlike younger clients checking mirrors, Audrey kept her eyes on him, absorbing his praise like parched earth absorbing rain. He complimented her alignment, adjusting her shoulder during a plank. His fingers lingered briefly, enough to plant a seed, not enough to alarm. Her reference to Edward, how he had praised her posture, revealed the ghost still haunting her. Ryan assured her this space was hers alone. Over weeks, Ryan catalogued everything. Her preference for morning sessions when light made her feel less exposed. How praise relaxed her shoulders, her hesitation when sessions ended. The wedding photo remained displayed despite her subtle flinch when glimpsing it. Meanwhile, his finances deteriorated. Rent increased. The credit card maxed for his studio space neared its payment deadline. His roommate Marcus repeatedly highlighted the opportunity in that penthouse. Lonely rich women made foolish decisions. Ryan could be set for life. He lingered after sessions, accepting offers of refreshment, hearing stories about travels and charity work, glimpses of a woman shadowed by her husband's ambitions. Surprisingly, he enjoyed their conversations. Audrey was well-read, thoughtful, with understated wit. Unlike other wealthy clients, she asked about his life and actually listened. When he mentioned his studio aspirations, she asked thoughtful questions about his business plan. He shared genuine parts of himself, Detroit childhood, college athletics derailed by injury, struggles in a city worshipping wealth. This contradiction troubled him. This was supposed to be calculated seduction for gain, not connection. Yet Audrey's quiet attention, thoughtful responses, and loneliness that mirrored his own blurred these lines. By their sixth session, the dynamic had shifted. Ryan observed changes in Audrey with professional satisfaction and unexpected personal interest. Her posture improved, confidence emerging, bolder workout attire, light makeup, hair down instead of severe buns. More telling was her natural laughter, as though forgetting her role as a wealthy widow in dignified mourning. After a successful session where Audrey surpassed previous limits, she invited him to stay for wine. The responsible answer was no. The professional answer was no. But the penthouse glowed as night fell over the lake, and her smile held none of the practiced politeness he'd first encountered. They sat on the balcony under Chicago's lights. Audrey spoke about her marriage, early partnership gradually calcifying into parallel lives, Edward's emotional distance, the loneliness of performing happiness. When she caught herself and apologized, Ryan seized his opportunity. He leaned forward, suggesting perhaps he didn't want appropriate. The air charged with possibility. Audrey's eyes searched his for deception, for the calculation that had been there weeks ago but now competed with something unexpected. When he kissed her, both performance and genuine desire guided him. Her response held years of emotional hunger, but also a tenderness that caught him off guard. As she led him inside, Ryan recognized the dangerous territory ahead, where planned seduction and unexpected attraction blurred into something neither had anticipated. Morning light filtered through the penthouse windows as Audrey traced the contours of Ryan's sleeping face. 3 weeks into their affair, and she still marveled at waking beside another human being. Edward had maintained separate bedrooms for most of their marriage. Practical, he'd called it. Now she understood what she'd been missing. The warmth, the intimacy, the quiet vulnerability of shared sleep. Their relationship consumed her like wildfire. Every surface of the penthouse held memories of their passion. The kitchen island where he'd lifted her unexpectedly. The shower where she'd discovered a boldness she never knew she possessed. The living room rug where they'd collapsed in laughter after a training session. Edward had approached intimacy like a business transaction. Scheduled, efficient, unfulfilling. Ryan approached her body like an unexplored country, with wonder and attentiveness that awakened sensations Audrey had forgotten or never known. She slipped from bed, wrapping herself in a silk robe purchased specifically because Ryan had admired the color against her skin. Her wardrobe had transformed. Gone were the conservative knits and sensible pearls Edward had approved. In their place hung flowing dresses, rich textures, deeper colors. She hardly recognized her reflection. Cheeks flushed, eyes bright, a smile playing constantly at her lips. Ryan stretched awake, watching Audrey's silhouette through the frosted glass door. He'd never intended to stay overnight, had never slept at clients' homes before. The plan had been simple: seduce the widow, secure financial backing, maintain emotional distance. Instead, he found himself lingering, inventing reasons to extend their time together. He'd cancelled other clients twice this week, something he'd never done before. Later that week, Audrey surprised him at his modest studio in Wicker Park. She'd never visited before, had never seen this part of his life. She looked out of place among the bare-bones equipment and peeling paint, her designer wear marking her as clearly as a flashing sign. Yet she moved through the space with genuine interest, asking questions about his training philosophy, admiring the community he'd built. "You've created something special here," she said, running her fingers along a weight rack. "But you deserve better equipment, more space." The opportunity presented itself. Ryan showed her his business plan. Real dreams mixed with calculated presentation. The location in Lincoln Park, the specialized equipment, the expanded classes. Audrey listened with intensity, asking pointed questions that revealed her own business acumen. The meeting with her financial advisor came next, then the lawyer, then the real estate agent. Within 2 weeks, Ryan signed a lease on a space 3 times his current studio, with Audrey's investment covering renovations, equipment, and operating costs for the first year. His gratitude during the contract signing wasn't entirely performance. He'd wanted this for years, had worked toward it with punishing hours. The fact that it came through Audrey both thrilled and troubled him. The celebration dinner afterward marked Audrey's first visit to Ryan's apartment in Logan Square. He'd spent hours cleaning, removing evidence of the life he didn't want her to see. Past due notices, cheap furnishings, the sense of a man living paycheck to paycheck. Marcus had made himself scarce, but not before giving Ryan a meaningful look and whispering to remember the endgame. The dinner felt like performance art. Ryan presenting a curated version of his life while Audrey absorbed every detail, hungry for authentic connection to his world. She examined his small collection of books, the framed photo of his college track team, the kitchen where he'd prepared their meal. The modest surroundings seemed to draw her closer rather than create distance. She'd lived in Edward's showcase for so long that Ryan's imperfect space felt like oxygen. The outside world intruded the following month at a charity gala, Audrey's first major social appearance with Ryan. He wore a tuxedo purchased with part of his studio advance, trying to project belonging in a world of inherited wealth. The whispers followed them across the ballroom, speculation about the widow Reynolds and her much younger companion. Audrey heard every whisper but held her head high, her hand firmly in Ryan's as they circulated. She introduced him as my partner to people who had dined in her home for years, daring them to comment. Most managed strained smiles, though a few women pulled her aside with concerned expressions and thinly veiled warnings. Her defiance thrilled Ryan even as it alarmed him. Her public claim accelerated a timeline he wasn't fully prepared for. The original plan had been clearer: seduce, secure funding, create distance. Instead, he found himself increasingly integrated into her life, their futures becoming intertwined in ways both exciting and terrifying. The meeting with Catherine Wells, Audrey's estate attorney, marked a turning point. The lawyer's office on Michigan Avenue screamed old money, old power, everything Ryan had resented growing up in Detroit. Catherine's expression remained professionally neutral as Audrey outlined the changes she wanted to her will. A significant portion to Ryan, should anything happen to me. Catherine suggested a smaller gift might be more appropriate given the relationship's brevity. Audrey's dismissal was swift. Edward had controlled every financial decision for 20 years. She wouldn't be questioned now. Ryan remained silent, equal parts triumphant and troubled. Marcus would be thrilled, the plan progressing faster than anticipated. Yet driving home afterward, Audrey's hand on his knee, he felt dishonest in ways that had never bothered him before. His new studio opened to considerable local press. The handsome trainer backed by the wealthy widow made for irresistible gossip. Audrey attended every event, arranged catering, surprised him with equipment upgrades. She checked his schedule daily, appeared with lunch or coffee, planned weekend trips, researched fitness conferences they could attend together. Ryan found her constant presence both flattering and suffocating. More disturbing was his own response. The genuine pleasure when she appeared, the emptiness when apart. He'd never intended to need her. The endgame had always been financial security, not emotional entanglement. Late one night, after the successful launch party for the studio, they lay tangled in her bed, city lights creating patterns across the ceiling. Audrey traced patterns on his chest, planning aloud for a holiday in Santorini, speaking of next year and our future with certainty that should have alarmed him. Instead, Ryan found himself turning toward her in the half-light, words forming before he could analyze their strategic value or authenticity. "I love you," he whispered, surprising himself with how much he meant it. 6 months into their relationship, Audrey and Ryan had established a comfortable rhythm to their days. The novelty had given way to routine, though not the stifling kind she had known with Edward. Ryan spent mornings at his thriving new studio, afternoons often with Audrey, and they rarely spent nights apart. The transformation of both their lives seemed complete, his financially, hers emotionally. Audrey had reorganized her entire existence around Ryan's schedule. Her once active involvement with the Art Institute board and 3 charitable foundations had dwindled to occasional appearances. She'd cancelled her standing Tuesday lunches with women she'd known for decades. Even her weekly hair appointments now revolved around when Ryan might be free. She tracked his whereabouts through casual questions and the studio's online booking system, noting which clients requested him specifically, particularly the younger, attractive ones. The February snow had driven them to impulsively book a weekend at Lake Geneva, a luxury resort 2 hours from Chicago. While Ryan showered, Audrey unpacked his hastily thrown together overnight bag. Her hand froze upon discovering an unmarked prescription bottle tucked inside a sock. She examined the pills, small blue tablets with no identifying features. Something stirred in her mind, an article she'd read once, a documentary she'd half-watched. These weren't recreational drugs. They looked medical, serious. When confronted, Ryan's expression had flickered briefly before settling into practiced concern. A minor heart condition, he'd explained, congenital, controlled with medication, nothing to worry about. He'd kept it private because he hated being seen as anything less than perfectly healthy, especially given his profession. The story was delivered with just enough embarrassment and vulnerability to seem authentic. Audrey had embraced him, apologized for invading his privacy, relieved that it wasn't drugs or another woman's number. What Audrey couldn't see was Ryan's inner panic, the careful calculation behind each word of his explanation. The pills were indeed for a condition, just not his heart. 3 years earlier, after a relationship with someone who hadn't disclosed their status, Ryan had been diagnosed with HIV. The antiretroviral medication had quickly made his viral load undetectable, a medical success story of modern treatment. His doctor had explained the scientific consensus. Undetectable meant untransmittable. He couldn't infect sexual partners. But Ryan understood perception. In the fitness world, in the wealthy circles Audrey inhabited, certain diagnoses carried stigma regardless of science. Disclosure would mean questions, uncomfortable conversations, possibly rejection before his plan could fully mature. So he maintained his regimen in secret, occasionally skipping doses when staying at Audrey's made privacy difficult. The lies compounded, one protecting another in an increasingly complex architecture of deception. The Lake Geneva incident faded as winter gave way to spring. March brought the annual lyric opera fundraiser, a staple of Chicago's social season. Audrey had donated generously in Edward's memory and purchased a premium table, proudly introducing Ryan to operatic society as if presenting a prize. The event had gone smoothly until the cocktail hour when a tall, elegant woman approached them. "Ryan Miller. Fancy seeing you in these circles," she'd said, her tone carrying an edge Audrey immediately recognized as intimate history. "Vanessa." Ryan had nodded coolly. "Audrey, this is Vanessa Chen. We knew each other briefly, years ago." Before Audrey could respond with practiced social pleasantries, Vanessa leaned closer. "Has he told you his entire medical history? You might want to ask specific questions." She'd smiled thinly and walked away, leaving her implication hanging in the air like expensive perfume. Ryan had dismissed it as the bitterness of a relationship that had ended badly. "She never forgave me for breaking things off," he'd explained later that night. "She'd wanted commitment I couldn't give at that stage of my career." The explanation was plausible, and Audrey wanted to believe it. Still, the seed of doubt had been planted, visible in how she studied his face when he thought she wasn't looking. April brought a lunch with Rebecca, the first in nearly 2 months. Her friend's concern was immediately evident. "You've changed, Audrey," Rebecca observed, watching her scan for messages from Ryan every few minutes. "When was the last time you attended a board meeting? Or saw that exhibition you were so excited about last fall?" Audrey's defensive response surprised even herself in its intensity. "I've spent 20 years living according to Edward's expectations and social obligations. I'm finally doing what I want." "Are you? Or are you just shifting from Edward's orbit to Ryan's?" Rebecca reached for her hand. "I introduced you two because you needed to reclaim yourself, not surrender to someone else." The lunch ended with strained smiles and vague promises to meet again soon, promises Audrey had no intention of keeping. Rebecca's concerns echoed those of Catherine, her lawyer, and several longtime friends who had gradually stopped calling. The isolation that had once seemed painful now felt protective, a bubble enclosing her and Ryan against judgment. Unbeknownst to Audrey, Ryan was having his own doubts. Over beers at their apartment, Marcus had questioned the timeline. "It's been 6 months," Marcus pointed out. "The fitness studio is successful. She's added you to her will, What are you waiting for? The longer this goes on, the messier it gets. Ryan stared at his bottle, unwilling to meet his roommate's eyes. It's complicated. It's only complicated because you're making it complicated, Marcus countered. The plan was clear. Get close, secure the investment, ensure you're in the will, then create distance until nature takes its course. If she gets tested and discovers your little health secret, she'll figure out the connection eventually. Ryan flinched at the casual cruelty. She doesn't deserve that. Deserve? Marcus laughed. Did you deserve growing up in a neighborhood where the streetlights didn't work while people like Audrey Reynolds bought third homes? Did you deserve working 16-hour days while these people inherit fortunes? This was your idea, remember? Later that night, lying awake in Audrey's bed, Ryan watched her sleeping face. The guilt had become a physical weight in his chest. He hadn't expected to care for her, her intelligence, her suppressed adventurousness, her genuine interest in his dreams beyond the scripted role Edward had confined her to. The calculated seduction had become something real, something that made the endgame increasingly difficult to contemplate. Meanwhile, Audrey's doubts crystallized in small observations. Ryan's occasional vagueness about his whereabouts, the prescription bottle never seen again, Vanessa's cryptic warning, his reluctance to discuss certain parts of his past. After a restless night, she made a decision she never thought she'd make. The card had sat in her desk drawer since Edward's suspicious phase a decade earlier. Marion Wells, private investigator. Discreet, thorough, expensive. Her hand trembled as she dialed the number. I need information about someone, Audrey said when a woman answered. Just for peace of mind. For 3 weeks, Marion Wells conducted her investigation with surgical precision while Audrey maintained a facade of normalcy with Ryan. The detective moved through the city like a ghost, documenting Ryan's movements, photographing his meetings, and quietly building a case. She tracked his regular visits to a specialized pharmacy in Boys Town, obtained copies of redacted medical records through connections at Northwestern Memorial, and constructed a financial history revealing years of mounting debt before meeting Audrey. When Marion presented her findings in a private conference room at the Four Seasons, Audrey's face remained perfectly composed, the same expression she'd perfected during Edward's business dinners when unpleasant news arrived. Only the trembling of her hands as she examined each document betrayed her inner turmoil. There's more, Marion said, sliding across her tablet. Text messages between Ryan and his roommate Marcus. They weren't easy to obtain, but I have sources. The screen displayed conversations spanning months. Widow settling the funds tomorrow. Don't get attached. Remember the endgame. Need to accelerate the timeline. Medical disclosure would complicate things. Once she's diagnosed, she'll decline quickly. The will is solid. Audrey's composure finally cracked. His HIV-positive. It wasn't a question. Marion nodded. Diagnosed 3 years ago. Undetectable viral load with medication. But he never told me. Audrey completed the thought, the magnitude of the betrayal washing over her. 2 days later, Audrey sat stone-faced in her doctor's office as he confirmed what she already knew. Her test had come back positive. The infection was recent, within months. The doctor spoke of modern treatments, of normal lifespans, of manageable conditions. Audrey heard none of it. She was calculating, planning, the Reynolds business acumen that had intimidated Edward's colleagues now channeled into a singular purpose. She scheduled her first treatment to begin after the upcoming weekend. She ordered her regular medications and arranged for her housekeeper to care for her plants. She checked the weekend weather forecast for Lake Michigan. Clear Friday, storms developing Saturday evening. Perfect. She called the marina where Edward's 45-foot yacht, unused since his death, remained perfectly maintained at considerable expense. Ryan sensed something had shifted but couldn't identify what. Audrey remained attentive, affectionate even, but a new distance had crept into her eyes. When he mentioned the studio's latest successes, she smiled with what appeared to be genuine pride. When he held her at night, she mulled against him as always. Only in unguarded moments, catching her studying him across the breakfast table, noticing her prolonged silence after his kiss, did he feel the subtle change. Marcus had grown increasingly impatient. "You need to wrap this up," he insisted during their last conversation. "It's been almost 8 months. You've got the studio, you're in the will. What are you waiting for? Just ghost her already and let nature take its course." For the first time in their friendship, Ryan had physically threatened Marcus, shoving him against the wall. "Don't talk about her like that. You've lost your edge," Marcus had taunted. "Falling for the mark? That's amateur hour." The night before their yacht trip, Audrey prepared a final dinner in the penthouse, Edward's favorite wines, Ryan's preferred dishes. She wore the blue dress from their first public appearance together, her performance flawless as she discussed their summer plans, a potential trip to Barcelona in fall, perhaps Christmas in Aspen. Ryan watched her with a mixture of adoration and guilt, his own performance increasingly difficult to maintain as his feelings continued to deepen. "I have something special planned for us tomorrow," she said, refilling his glass. "Edward's yacht. I've never taken it out since, well, but it's time to make new memories." Friday morning dawned clear and cool, perfect boating weather. The Chicago shoreline gleamed as they pulled away from Burnham Harbor, the skyline gradually diminishing behind them. Audrey handled the vessel with surprising skill. Edward had insisted she learn, one of his few useful contributions to her life. Ryan watched her with admiration, another piece of her he hadn't known existed. They anchored miles from shore, the water deep blue beneath them, the horizon empty in all directions. Audrey prepared lunch in the galley while Ryan explored the vessel, marveling at another symbol of wealth that had always been beyond his reach. The yacht represented everything the Reynoldses had enjoyed while people like him struggled, the ultimate justification for his plan. As they ate on the rear deck, the conversation flowed naturally until Audrey casually mentioned getting tested for STIs. "Just routine," she explained, watching his expression carefully. "My doctor recommends it for anyone in a new relationship." Ryan's fork paused halfway to his mouth, a flicker of panic crossing his features before he recovered. "Sounds responsible." "Imagine my surprise," Audrey continued, her voice cooling several degrees, "when my results came back positive for HIV. The transformation was immediate." Ryan's face drained of color, his practiced charm vanishing like morning mist. "Audrey, I can explain." "Please do." She removed a folder from beside her chair, spreading its contents methodically across the table. Pharmacy records, medical reports, text messages, photographs of his meetings with Marcus. "Explain how you targeted me. How you calculated that my loneliness made me vulnerable. How you discussed my eventual diagnosis as a way to accelerate the payout." Ryan's denial crumbled in the face of irrefutable evidence. His attempted explanations died on his lips. When cornered, he reverted to truth. "Yes, I targeted you," he admitted, something hardening in his expression. "People like your husband, like you, have everything handed to them while the rest of us fight for scraps. Do you know what it's like working 3 jobs and still choosing between rent and medication? Your monthly charity donations are more than I made in a year before meeting you." His confession spilled out, the resentment, the plan, the calculation. But also the unexpected complication: "I didn't expect to care about you. That wasn't part of the plan. Yet you continued to lie, to expose me, to plan for my death." Audrey's voice remained perfectly controlled. "I loved you," Ryan insisted, reaching for her hand. "That part was real." Storm clouds gathered on the horizon as their confrontation escalated. Ryan's pleas turned to anger, then to threats. When Audrey turned away, he grabbed her arm roughly. The sudden motion, the boat's gentle rocking, the slick deck from gathering rain, it happened in seconds. Ryan stumbled against the railing, his head striking metal with a sickening sound before he tumbled backward into the darkening waters. Audrey stood motionless at the rail, the life preserver within easy reach. Below, Ryan struggled against waves growing choppier with the approaching storm. Their eyes met across the widening distance. Her hand never moved toward the preserver. Lightning split the sky as she turned away. The life preserver hung on the railing, its white and red surface bright against the darkening sky. Audrey's fingers brushed its edge, then fell away. Below, Ryan thrashed against the increasingly violent waves. His eyes locked on hers in disbelief, then understanding, then fear. She watched with clinical detachment as his movements grew weaker, as the distance between the yacht and his struggling form increased. The storm swallowed him whole, nature becoming the instrument of justice that no court could have delivered. Complex emotions crashed through her as violently as the waves against the hull. Vindication, horror, grief, relief. She had loved him. He had betrayed her. Both statements existed simultaneously, neither cancelling the other. As his form disappeared completely beneath the churning surface, Audrey acknowledged the finality of her decision, not just the passive choice to withhold help, but the active creation of circumstances that led to this moment. The journey back to shore tested her sailing skills and her resolve. The storm intensified, washing the deck clean of any evidence, nature conspiring with her deception. By the time she guided the yacht into Burnham Harbor, her story had solidified in her mind, rehearsed during each mile of solitary return. Her hands steady on the wheel, Audrey Reynolds became someone new, a woman who had taken justice into her own hands and would carry that weight forever. The harbor master noticed her return alone. The Coast Guard was called. Detective Thomas Barrett arrived within the hour, his weathered face revealing nothing as Audrey recounted the tragic accident. The sudden storm, Ryan's slip on the wet deck, her desperate attempts to throw him the preserver, the waves carrying him beyond reach. She performed grief with perfect pitch. The shock, the trembling hands, the hollow voice of someone witnessing something unthinkable. "We were celebrating," she whispered. 6 months together. He'd never been on the yacht before. Barrett's eyes narrowed slightly. 23 years with Chicago PD had honed his instincts. Something in her composed recitation triggered his suspicion, but suspicion wasn't evidence. The search began immediately despite the storm, continuing for 3 days before being designated a recovery mission rather than a rescue. Lake Michigan kept its secrets well. Ryan's body was never found. The memorial service attracted local fitness community members and Audrey's social circle performing obligatory appearances. Marcus arrived late, his eyes red-rimmed from what might have been grief or something chemical. When his gaze met Audrey's across the room, a moment of silent recognition passed between them. He knew, or at least suspected. Neither approached the other. What could possibly be said? The investigation continued perfunctorily. Without a body, without witnesses, with only circumstantial evidence of anything beyond tragic accident, the case gradually lost momentum. Detective Barrett interviewed Audrey twice more, his questions circling the timeline, the weather conditions, their relationship. Her answers remained consistent, her demeanor appropriately grieved yet composed. After 6 weeks, the case was officially classified as an accidental drowning. Audrey lived in a strange limbo of emotions, relief at escaping both legal consequences and Ryan's deception, guilt over her role in his death, grief for the authentic parts of their connection, anger at his betrayal. She began treatment for HIV immediately, accepting the lifelong consequences of Ryan's deception. Modern medicine offered management, not cure, another permanent reminder she would carry. 3 months after the incident, Audrey established the first of several anonymous foundations, one dedicated to HIV/AIDS research, another to education programs about financial coercion and relationship manipulation. Her wealth, once a target that had drawn Ryan to her, became a tool for addressing the very circumstances that had created their tragic intersection. The studio Ryan had built thrived under new management, Audrey maintaining ownership but removing herself from operations. She sold the penthouse, unable to inhabit spaces filled with memories of their relationship, both the genuine moments and the calculated performances. The yacht she donated to a youth sailing program, never setting foot on it again. Chicago's social circles buzzed briefly about the tragedy before moving on to fresher gossip. Rebecca reached out repeatedly. Audrey eventually allowed her back into her life, though the friendship never fully recovered its former closeness. Some boundaries, once crossed, created permanent distances. 1 year to the day after Ryan's death, Audrey stood on Promontory Point, watching the horizon where the yacht had traveled that fateful day. The lake stretched calm and innocent before her, offering no acknowledgement of what it had witnessed and concealed. Her health had stabilized with treatment, Her philanthropic work had expanded. Her life had found a new rhythm, solitary but purposeful. She had taken justice into her own hands, becoming both victim and executioner in a single moment of choice. The woman who had stood frozen at the railing was neither the naive widow Ryan had targeted nor the perfect society wife Edward had cultivated. She was something forged in betrayal and tempered by consequence, a woman who had learned the true weight of power and its price. "We both got what we deserved, Ryan," she whispered to the distant horizon, a complex peace settling across her features as she turned away from the water and walked back toward the city, alone and finally free.